Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to go over a bunch of different deck list options that you can take for this weekend's qualifier weekend. There's both the Explorer qualifier play in best of 3 on Friday, as well as the actual qualifier weekend event itself on Saturday. I've been testing a lot for this. I've been trying a bunch of different decks. I got last week qualified in best of 1 with the cheesy 9 lives, donate the deck card, blow it up the world deck, and been trying a bunch of different decks to see which one works best for us. So I'm going to give you a quick run through of popularity of decks, the win rates themselves. I'm going to kind of highlight my pick of my deck that I'm going to play. The biggest factor, having played a lot of these decks, it's pretty flat in terms of there's key decks that are powerful. Familiarity with the deck goes a long way. Like, I was picking up decks that I've seen other people have very high win rates with, and they just weren't clicking with me. Either I wasn't having fun, I wasn't enjoying it, it just wasn't like vibing with me. I just wasn't doing well. So I think that kind of came across where I was piloting a deck that's maybe a little less powerful, but I'm familiar with all the lines, I know how to run it better, and my win rate was reflecting that. So it's kind of one of the factors, I think. Just play something you're comfortable with first and foremost. But we'll cover a bunch of different deck lists here as well. So we're going to look Diamond to Mythic rank. We're getting the data from Untapped GG, what you see on the screen. Link for Untapped is in the video description. I'll paste all these deck lists as well, so you could import them to your heart's content. So we'll start off with the meta distribution. So for popularity of the day, see Rakdos Vampires taking up about a quarter of the meta, followed by Amalia at about 10%. We had a return of Mono Green Devotion, which has picked up in terms of popularity as well. So there's quite a few lists here that have been doing pretty well. So we'll pull up one of these. I think this is the one I might have been looking at, but we'll cover that shortly thereafter as well. And then Azorius Control at about 5, Phoenix at about 5, Izzet Ensoul about 3, the Red Wizards 3, and then Discard at about 3. But we see Vampires is picking up quite a bit in terms of overall popularity in terms of the deck. So something to just kind of keep in mind as we go through. So we'll jump into the stats itself, but before we do, just quick thing. We're trying to hit 15,000 subs on the channel. We're closing in on 13,000. Free, easy helps with the channel. We do this coverage of metagame for every format, every week. Best of 1, best of 3, special events, everything like that. Your one-stop shop for everything metagame, so greatly appreciate it if you can. And let's jump into it. So we are going to be looking the last week, Diamond and Mythic rank. I want to go like the highest kind of win rate and kind of go from there in terms of what's happening. So Mono Green has the highest win rate. When this deck pops off, it pops off hard now. It can be clunky at times. I do think you have to mulligan quite aggressively in terms of finding the optimal hands. Obviously, similar to like the past versions, when you have Nykthos, you go harder than when you don't have Nykthos. But kind of the core of this version of the deck, you don't have a Karn package. You're using Leyline of the Guild Pack. So ideally, you want this in your opener, drop it down. And then if you have access to either Sunken Citadel and Nykthos, you can activate it on turn 2, or like a Nykthos and an Elf. The Nykthos taps for green mana if you have Leyline out, so it works that way there. Get it out early, generates huge amounts of mana. You can like turn 2 Cavalier of Thorns depending on how many Leylines and Elves you have. Very powerful. And then you have the draw engine of Outcaster, Trailblazer, and Kiora, so basically spams you through your deck. So what you're trying to do is basically generate a huge amount of mana, keep storming off, getting more things into play. Eventually you'll get Uvenwald Oddity, and this is kind of your Craterhoof Behemoth effect. You generate enough mana to then flip Uvenwald, and then everything gets haste, so you can attack in that same turn. You help find your Nykthos with things like Archdruid's Charm and Invasion of Ixalan. Seen some versions as well that'll play like Elish Norn in the main board, since it's good in the mirror, good against Amalia, stuff like that. And we see her in the sideboard here. Deafening Silence for like Storm decks, Pick Your Poison for Vampires, anything enchantments, stuff like that. Tail Swipe is just some removal, Stone Brain for combo, and Licensors for Graveyard Hate, and then Obsidian's Baloth for heavy discard style decks. I was bringing it in against the aggro too, just to have some incidental life gain on the backside. So that's Mono Green. We then go to Izzet Phoenix. So there's kind of two variations that you might see. There's ones with Prof's Eidetic Memory, and then some without. But kind of the core of the deck is to fill your graveyard through either looting effects with like Ledger Shredder, Picklock Prankster to kind of self-mill, and cast a bunch of spells, get Phoenix back from your yard. All the extra card draw gets you to add extra power to your creatures thanks to Proph's Eidetic Memory. One thing to note, just in terms of the sequencing, this is at the beginning of your combat. So when the Phoenix comes in, it's already at the beginning of your combat. So it's after that. So you don't get to get the Phoenix and then that same turn put the counters on it. So something to just be mindful there. A bunch of cheap burn, Lightning Axe, Fire Impulse, Torch the Tower, all kind of mixed into there. Some Spell Pierces for disruption, just a lot of cheap cantrips in the deck itself. Sideboard, just like Aether Gust for red-green stuff, negates for counters against like creature decks. You can shift, especially if they're bringing in a lot of graveyard hate. You have like Young Pyromancer, Brazen Borrow, Crackling Drake to kind of shift out of it. Brotherhood's End, Anger Sweepers, Disputes for more counters, Ashiok for the mirror, as well as Amalia if they're trying to search their decks, anything of that nature. So you have your Phoenix deck there. Then Boros Convoke at 72%. So new card being tried out, Ultic Matter Weaver, 3 mana, 2/4. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you either make a gnome or you create a token that's a copy of target artifact token you control. So you can either make like a token of like the food or like the blood, the clues, but for the most part, it's just cast a creature, get a creature, kind of chain it out in that respect. But core of the deck is play one of these dorks that make an artifact, throw Gleeful Demolition on it, start getting your Convoke value out. 3 Recruiters is interesting. I think that this card's one of the best pop-offs with going wide. Interesting to see like the Sanguine Evangelist in this version as well. You typically don't see this density of 3-drops. You see the full cases, the full Loxodon. So interesting kind of tweak there. If you have this deck in Standard, it's pretty easy to build in this format as well. It's pretty much all Standard legal, except some of the Mana Base and the Venerated Loxodon. Then got the Companion, Giant Killer for big things, Cathar Commando, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Containment Priest if they try to cheat in Vampires. If they try to cheat in Amalia stuff, you can get them there. Flame Scroll, basically, you can silence them for the turn. So if your opponent tries to sweep the board or something like that, protect. Thalia for tax, Bone Crusher is some more removal. And then Giant Cindermount, you might say, but there's Rampaging Ferocidon. It's just better. But in this deck, having Rampaging Ferocidon will probably kill you faster than it kills your opponent. This is the anti-life gain for the Amalia deck. We can go to Abzan Amalia, 70%. So seeing a couple different versions. Instead of Return to the Ranks, we're seeing some copies of Lively Dirge. Lets you search your library for a card, put it into the graveyard, then shuffle, and then you could kind of reanimate. So it's another way to kind of get the combo going. This version's got some Deep Cavern Bats for disruption, but also could trigger the combo as well. So you can kind of win through, like, if they have Torpor Orb style effects, stuff like that. Sentinel of the Nameless City is another way you can trigger the life gain thanks to the Explore package. So you can trigger like with the map token and Explore, and then that triggers the Wild Growth loop. Basically, Amalia, Wild Growth Walker, and some way to gain life creates an infinite loop. Amalia gets 20 power, blows up the board. You stack it so Aether Flux Reservoir goes on top of your library. So either you attack with Amalia and kill them, or you Aether Flux and like 50 ball them. Sideboard, you got Fatal Pushes as removal, Haywire Might, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Cameo Safekeeping as protection. This caught me a couple times when I was playing Gruul. Thoughtseize for hand hate, Get Lost as removal, Knight for the mirror, Aven Interrupter as a protection effect, Lily for like grindier matchups, also a way to kind of hit a potential Vein Ripper, and then Skyclave for more removal against stuff like Rampaging Ferocidons or various kind of hate pieces that might come in. So the next one, we're going to kind of bundle Gruul Burn from the ladder, Mono Red Wizards, and what I've been doing on the Gruul side for the last like month and a half. I've been playing these burn-based strategies, whether it be Mono Red Gruul. I was practicing for an RCQ, so I got a bunch of games in, kind of seeing variations. But core of the deck is, it's basically, so this version's at 70%. Basically a slick shot. You have Swift Spear, Soul Scar kind of packaged in with like Monstrous Rage. You have some number of protection effects. This version's opting for Blossoming Defense plus Tyvar Stand. You have Questing Druid in here as a way for card advantage. Most of the lists will play some number of Witch Stalker Frenzies as well. And then this version's on the Audacity, kind of heavier targeted. So this one's a little bit more all in. You can push huge amounts of damage. I think Picnic Ruiner is a little soft all in all. Like tapping out on turn 2 for this is pretty weak. Doesn't inherently have haste. I've largely trimmed this out of my deck as well. The one thing with this version was good when the meta was heavier. Like for a while, there's a lot of the mono black waste not going around. If like controls more around, these versions can be fine. It's worse into the mirror and to the mono red Wizard's Burn because they tend to have a little bit more removal. So you have a lot more cards that require creatures when they're just playing straight like burn that can either be flexible for removal or hit the creatures. So that's one thing I found with the deck itself. The sideboard Grafdigger's Cage I actually like and might pull this as I have kind of like a flex spot that I'm trying to fill. Pick Your Poison's very good against temporary lockdowns. It's good against random, like even like the Ensoul artifacts deck. You can do random flyers. It's good against Vein Ripper. It's good against Traxa. Very, very good card. Playing 3 to 4 is key. This version's on 2 Red Cap Melees for the mirror, 3 Rending Volleys for the blue and the white. Also, I bring this in against Amalia. Magebane Lizard as a 2 of, Ferocidon as a 2 of. The one thing with this particular setup, it's a little soft, so it doesn't have a lot of consistent card advantage. If you're playing a lot of mid-range kind of decks, I find it a little struggling, similar with Control, because you're playing kind of all into the board. The one thing I've tried some numbers of is Burning Hands. If Mono Green's popular, you might want like a copy of Burning Hands. It's also could just be brought in, because Burning Hands, it's like Fail State is 2 mana deal 2, which can then hit most creatures from Amalia. It could hit Wild Growth Walker as well. It's reasonable in the mirror in that case. Phoenix is one of the toughest matchups. Just so the Ledger Shredder on 2 is hard to deal with because you want to cast multiple spells. It gets bigger, it blocks your flyers, stuff of that nature. The Magebane Lizard's been very good. So we look at that. We go to the mono red version. The mono red version, it's at 60%. It's not the next concurrent deck, but I want to kind of show it in contrast. This version here, it's got the wizard package. So you see Gitu Lava Runner, you see Wizard's Lightning. This one's on 2 cases in the main board just for card advantage. This is more explosive in just terms of sheer like quickness. It's very susceptible to removal. If your opponent goes turn 3 Vein Ripper, you pretty much lose because you're banking on that Witch Stalker Frenzy and a creature, which oftentimes they'll have some sort of interaction leading up to it as well. I find like this one's close to an auto lose against wizards or against vampires pretty hard. So you end up with like Rending Volleys, Magebane. You also can't deal with like an Atraxa. You can't really deal with enchantments or like various effects like that. You have a Rolling Vortex for like anti-life gain along with the Ferocidons, just some more card advantage engines, but fine. This version's better into Gruul, but I think worse against some of the other decks of the format. And then kind of where I've been at, so I've been trying 2 versions. I was 36 and 20. At one point I was 34 and 14, but the wheels kind of fell off. So this was the older version of the deck I was running. We had the Atarkus command. I kind of cut them. I just find it was just stuck in my hand a lot of time, wasn't doing much. The Bone Crusher Giant was kind of my flex card as removal in the main board. And then I'm going to kind of show the updated because my sideboard's kind of similar here. Where I've kind of going to be siding with, let's go back. I'm going to probably go with a hybrid. So I'm doing Gruul Wizards. So it is got the Wizards package. We still have Gitu Lava Runner in here. We have the full Soulscar Mage Slick Shot with the Wizards Lightning. We have the Questing Druid's Mane. I did a split between Blossoming Defense and Snakeskin Veil. I think keeping the additional counter on afterwards at times is better. In the mirror, it gets you the extra toughness, which can be impactful for certain things like just Phoenix has burn-based damage, so keeping it potentially above 3 helps at times. Getting things to 4 against Blood Tithe Harvester, getting things to 3 afterwards is helpful. So I find that a little bit more impactful. Outside of that, I got rid of the Audacities. We're playing more burn-based, just very like lean. You see our curves like 1-drops. This is really a 1-drop, so our only 2 drops are these here. I did cut the Bezeju in the main just to play another basic. There's a lot of various decks playing Field of Ruin that were kind of picking apart my mana base. I've also went to 2 Ramanop runes, and I just trimmed on a pathway. We're playing fewer green cards, so we can just play fewer pathways and just play a basic instead. My sideboard, we got the full Pick Your Poison set. I have the Red Cap Melee in here. For the mirror, Rending Volley, 2 Magebane, then 2 Case in the side for the grindy matchups. Against Control, against Rakdos, against Mono Black, against anything heavy removal, I'm bringing in Urbrask's Forge. This has won me tons of games between both decks against Control. It helps me against Rakdos. At times, you're just going to be, like, they're going to 1-for-1 you with a lot of removal, Path to Perils, temporary lockdowns, just various removal options. You have them kind of from there. And then you have the Witch Stalker Frenzy. So right now, this is kind of like my flex spot. I wanted to have a 5 damage spell in there for Shieldred, stuff like that. And then I could see it's really just you making the meta call going in. I think I might switch this back to Burning Hands. Just seeing the prevalence of mono green. It helps in a number that, like, it could help against Amalia, it could help against mono green. We have our Phoenix package, which is Pick Your Poison, Rending Volley, and Magebane Lizard kind of mixed into there. So you have some options between that. Against Phoenix, sometimes I may consider bringing in like a Case as well, just in terms of the grindier matchups, because they tend to just overwhelm you at times. That's kind of my thoughts. Again, play with what you're comfortable with, but I spend a lot of time on these Gruul builds. Played like probably like almost 100 matches now. So we go to Rakdos Vampires. So there's quite a few different variations. You'll sometimes see Archfiend of Dross. Some of the decks are playing like a Kalidas Shieldred mix. Some have gone back to Bone Crusher Giant as just some additional removal. The number of creatures could vary. Some are on Bankbuster, some are on Copter. It's kind of configuring to your content, but 5 discards main, your Fatal Pushes, Bitter Triumph, Edict in the main. If you're skilled, you usually Thoughtseize them, Blood Tithe Harvester into Sorin, or like Thoughtseize them, kill their thing, and then Ripper on turn 3, kind of mixed into there. Sideboard's just more hand hate, just Rending Volleys, Bankbusters, Hearse. So card advantage, Graveyard Hate. One thing I would suggest is probably play a second Blot Out in place of this. Just in the mirror, having Blot Out's really big to deal with opponents' Vein Rippers. A lot of it comes down to who could get the Ripper out first, and then who could kind of manage its removal. Go blank for hand hate and graveyard hate. Golgan's Command for the grindier matchups. Also artifact hate. Some sweepers in here. Kalidas for the aggressive matchups. So they were playing Wakebringer. I prefer Knight of Dusk's Shadow. I was listening to Andrea Mangucci, who was playing a version of Vampires as well. He won his RCQ. He was playing 2. To get the Quakebringer out, it's just very expensive. You have to either commit 2 turns worth of mana, or it's a 5 mana play. While it does dodge Skyclave Apparition and Fatal Push, it's just harder to get out on curve, where Amalia can beat you on turn 3. We have a Return of Humans, 64%. So this version of Humans, mainboarding Containment Priest, both for Amalia as well as the Vampires list. You can tax them with some effects. This deck's very soft to like sweepers at times, like Path to Peril and Extinction Event. You can brave the elements against targeted removal. It can snowball very hard. Adeline, Brutal Cathar kind of go wide. This deck's also got, like, its only card advantage engine is the Recruitment Officer. So you are kind of contingent on, this is the composition of my hand, this is what we're doing, and then we're kind of going to top deck mode. You can offset it a bit by having access to Mutavaults and Castle Ardenvales, just for utility lands. Cavern, make your stuff uncounterable. Sideboard removal, Requisition Raid as an Anthem, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Get Lost as more removal, Invasion of Gobakan as tax effect, Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate, and then Anoint Peacekeepers for, probably bring this against Vampires, Control, stuff like that, like the grindier mid-range matchups, just to kind of eat at their hand. Azorius Control, 61% win rate. So this version here, you'll notice a lot of the decks are actually playing some number of Sunfalls now. This is in part because of Vampires. You get the death trigger on Ripper if you play something like Supreme Verdict. Sunfall's a clean answer, exiles everything nicely. 3 steps ahead being played in the deck a bit. March of Otherworldly, Portable Hole. So this version here, so usually the tell, if you see Kahira, they're usually not on temporary lockdown, they play Portable Hole instead. So that's usually a call there. Obviously, if you see your opponent play a Portable Hole, they are not going to be playing temporary lockdown. It's a non-bow because it would just give your thing back. Some sensors, deduce, get lost mixed into here. You have the Narset Gaia Reach Sanitarium kind of lock that can happen. Wandering Emperors, Deluged, two Teferis kind of mixed into there. Sideboard, Aether Gust as kind of removal. Narset Reversal for like discard effects. Graveyard Hate, red-based aggro hate. Dispute for the Mirrors. Starheim Unleash as another win condition. Hard for things like Rakdos or stuff to deal with. Against the aggressive decks, you also have Regal Caracal. That just makes multiple bodies, Lifelinkers, and then in kind of the controlling matchups, you have Sharp Typhoon as well. Izzet Ensoul, 60% win rate. So this deck here, I find this deck either does incredibly busted things or just looks like a draft deck. Kind of the core is you're using things that make cheap artifacts, Spyglass Siren, Voldaren, to throw on the Ensoul artifact to make you have 5/5s. You can animate the Darksteel Citadel to make it a 5/5 that's indestructible. Smuggler's Copter plays really nicely here, kind of looting through your deck. You have Shrapnel Blast to throw artifacts. Inti could give all your big things trample. The Case also is another way to animate. Then you just have like Disruption effects, Spell Pierce, Torch the Tower. Legion Extruder is kind of like a Bone Crusher adjacent card. Deals 2, and then you can sack artifacts to make golems. Cryptic Code is another bounce effect to get, or it's like threat that could keep being bounced back that plays well against sweepers and stuff like that. Found this deck to be quite poor playing from behind. So if you're not skilled at being on the play, like the games I was on the play, it was like rolling, but the games I was like behind, I found it kind of awkward at times. Like you're trying to catch up and your cards aren't the best for catching up. You also, again, another deck that's fairly limited in terms of card advantage. You have like pseudo card advantage with Inti, but it's kind of some setup required. That was one of the problems I found with the deck. Just more removal options depending on matchup. Magebane Lizard for like Phoenix and Control. Dispute for counters. Chrome War to steal your opponent's Bane Rippers or Big Thing. Remember, the Crone War, Chapter 3 goes off. You crew everything with the Copter, so all those creatures die instead of going back to your opponent. Then go to 5-color Quint, 59%. This is another deck that either feels like you're doing the most busted thing ever, or you literally do nothing. Kind of the deck is Quintorius minus, and then you just keep copying it multiple times and burn them out. You can also use Trumpeting Carnosaur to get you into the loop as well. You have a bunch of ways to kind of find lands, gain life. So Spinewood's Armadillo, Leyline Binding is cheap removal, Tanuki ramps you, Beanstalk ramps you, Virtue is removal, and some life gain. The one thing I think I've preferred, so this leaves you a creature behind after, but I preferred having the instant speed option to ramp when I was playing the deck, so I would kind of switch it there. Because at times you might want to decide, am I going to be holding up Leyline Binding or not? Do I need a Trumpeting Carnosaur's removal? And it gives you the option. This version here also is playing the Cavernous Souls to name Dinosaur, which helps with resolving your big creature. Sideboard, Connive, Consume. You're basically playing this for the consume part for your opponent to sacrifice Bane Rippers, Stop Distortion versus Control, Mirror Shell for counterspells, Virtue as more removal, along with the Bedeck, which is basically just a -3/3 at instant speed. So a couple different options there. And then lastly, because I'm getting tired of talking, 58% for Mono Black Waste Not. So the kind of deck is built around Waste Not, forcing your opponent to discard. Liliana discards, Karavik with all the crime lets you rebuy stuff. You have Go Blank's main, Hostile Investigator is another way to force discard and get you some value from it. Aklazot's for discard. You also have the combo of Gaia Reach Sanitarium, so you force your opponent to draw a discard. So even if they're hellbent, you can still force and trigger the Waste Not. Then just a bunch of removal, card advantage with Reckoner, Bankbuster. Sideboard Hand Hate, Night of Dusk Shadow for Anti-Amalia, Invoke for card advantage, Ashiok for graveyard, and Search, more Go Blanks for like Control, Path Peril Extinction for the aggressive decks, and Invoke for like the mid-range kind of battles, kind of going from there. So that is it. That is your rundown. Good luck to everyone playing. If you play me, don't stream snipe me, please. But good luck. Hopefully everyone's doing well against unless you're playing against me, then let me win. Kidding, but good luck everyone. Have a good one.